Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Hi there, Kate.
Hey, Fahrusha, welcome.
And so here we are again. And let's not forget to slate. Today is
June 7th.
2016.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And this will be our 32nd show. So, today on Shattered Reality, we're going to start with author Ron Felber. He has been on the show before, and this has been with the Mojave incident. Today he's back with his new novel, Dark Angel. Now, we don't generally do novels, but what we're going to talk about with him is the variety of different research he did for this latest thriller. And it is a three-book series of Jack Madsen. And Jack Madsen is a real tough guy. So without any further ado, here is Ron Felber. Hi, Ron.
How are you? Good to be here.
It's good to have you. Seriously, that's a great introduction to your book, a nail-biting thriller. Government conspiracies, research into cloning and mind control, and the creation of a transhuman super soldier. A few years back, this would be just sci-fi. I think you're getting close onto shattered reality here.
Yes, indeed. Before we step into the whole world of Dark Angel, let us congratulate you because the Mojave incident is being made into a made-for-TV movie or something like that?
Yeah, we have a deal with the Sci-Fi Channel, and so we're going to have an hour segment that will be devoted to the Mojave incident and the experiences with the alien abduction of Stephen Dawn Hess.
Well, that's really very interesting. And the original folks, are they involved at all? The family, the actual family?
Yes, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, it was really something because we all met after a number of years, and including the doctors involved. So the show will have videotape of the hypnotic sessions and interviews with all of the key players, including the doctors, the medical doctors involved. One, Dr. Bernard Raton, who is director of the National Center of Psychiatry in Washington, D.C., very prominent physician and psychiatrist. The other, William Annixter from the Asheville, North Carolina, director of psychiatric care there. So these are two very prominent physicians, and I was really pleased that they were willing to step forward and do lengthy interviews and also volunteer the original tapes that were recorded during their sessions.
Oh, well, that's great. And the family?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they are very much a part of this, and it's unique because for the longest time, really, they did not step forward, and so it was really delightful to see that they wanted to be involved, and they did extensive interviews in front of the cameras for this show.
So this is going to be on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yes, Paranormal Witness is the name of the show.
Is the series, and you have one full night of the series with the Mojave incident. Is
correct.
That correct?
It'll be devoted to this one episode. Yes.
Do you have any idea what date and time this will be?
It's being filmed right now. The interviews have been done for about a month now, and now they're working on actors. How about that? So somebody's actually going to play me. I said, how about George Clooney? And they said no.
Yeah,
So how
you
about
both
Brad
have
Pitt?
dark hair.
They said no. so anyway,
Who is-
it
who
should be
did
a
you
lot
say
of fun.
was
I think
playing you?
October.
Okay. An incident like that, you wonder how much more evidence anybody needs to sort of believe that something happened to these people.
This was really a stunning account, as
Yeah.
you are aware, and just extensive. So, a lot of times you'll hear, like with the Betty and Barney Hill, going back to the 60s, that somebody has, or a couple, which is unusual, to have more than one person, is abducted, and it's recovered through retrogressive hypnosis. But with the Mojave incident and the Hess situation, it was about 4 or 5 hours of conscious experience. And then they had these violent nightmares. They remembered something had happened to them, missing time, and another 4 hours was recovered that was actually on the craft itself.
Amazing.
That's going to be a great movie, or episode.
Made-for-TV
Yes.
Episode.
movie episode.
Yeah, that.
And actually, we are working on a feature film as well. So also at the Sci-Fi Channel, but that's not quite in the can yet.
Right.
Okay, well, we wish you the very best of luck with that.
Thank you.
And keep us
perhaps,
up to date.
I was going to say, perhaps you could get together with Kathleen Martin and Denise Stoner, since they're into abductions and this type of
Yes,
stories.
that would be an excellent idea. And
I'd be delighted.
Reyneros Hernandez is also involved there. In any case, moving on to Dark Angel. This, as we've said, this is really an interesting thriller, and this is the third book with Jack Madsen. Do you have any immediate plans for another book?
Actually, I do have another book I'm working on, and I'm hoping to finish the outline and 3 or 4 sample chapters by September, and have the book written by January. It's not a Jack Madsen story, but actually it's a sort of combination of a lot of the things I learned in Dark Angel and Mojave Incident, put into a fictional account, which is called The Radiant.
I see. Well, we'll be looking forward to that as well. Basically, starting off at the beginning, you discuss Josef Mengele, and you say that he did not die until 1978 in Argentina.
That's correct, yeah.
And you spoke about the rat line, but you didn't explain the rat line in the book.
Sure. Well, basically, the book starts with Josef Mengele leaving Germany, escaping Germany as the Allies invade. And like many others, Klaus Barbie, Eichmann, and others, there was what they called the rat line. The CIA at that time was called the OSS. And the OSS, by way of a sort of a Faustian agreement with the Nazis, agreed to give safe haven to some of the most notorious criminals, war criminals, such as Josef Mengele, the Angel of Death, and relocate them to Bolivia, to Argentina, to Brazil, etc., Paraguay,
Chile.
and Chile. And actually, many of these guys went on to become key players in the militaries of those countries and change their identities. But this was the CIA actually releasing these people, putting them through different lines with different identifications, relocating them, giving them new identities and safe haven in return for other people like Werner von Braun, like Reinhard Gehlen, and other key scientists and spies to come into the CIA and work for the United States government. So, for example, Werner von Braun was notorious for making the V2 missiles that were dropped on England and killed thousands and thousands of people, citizens, women, children, just regular citizens, not.
Hi, we're back from the break. Let's start again with Reinhold Gehlen.
Yeah. So as I was saying, Reinhard Gehlen was one of the chief architects of the Nazi intelligence agency. And what they had done out of Frankfurt, Germany, was to infiltrate the Soviet Union with spies. Now, after the war ended, of course, we knew that our next enemy was going to be the Soviet Union. That was in the cards. And as a matter of fact, Winston Churchill wanted to continue the war. So did Patton, and take on the Soviet Union right away. So we knew a Cold War was coming. So basically what happened was Reinhard Gehlen had these 7,000 spies that had infiltrated the Soviet Union. We needed intelligence on the Soviet Union. And so we let escape and gave safe haven to some of the most notorious war criminals. And I mentioned Klaus Barbie, I mentioned Josef Mengele, Eichmann, etc. Gave them safe haven. And in return, we got access to this spy network. So Reinhard Gehlen kept his offices in Frankfurt, Germany. And instead of reporting to Goering and Hitler, wound up reporting to Allen Dulles and to Truman.
Does it really matter what side you're on? They just got a bunch of boys playing these games, and people get killed. Anyway.
Dangerous games, yeah.
Yeah, very. So, but just for the information of some of our younger listeners, what exactly was Dr. Mengele up to?
Well,
or what was he not up to? He's a bad boy.
You know, one of the things that got me interested in writing that Dark Angel, this Jack Madsen book, was a conversation I had with a colleague in Germany. And we had a glass of beer, and we were just talking about post-World War II in America and this and that. And the subject of Adolf Hitler came up, and he made a chilling statement. He said, Adolf Hitler wasn't wrong. He was just ahead of his time.
Oh.
And then he went on to talk about genetic engineering, the idea of designer children, which we talk about now, the idea of perfecting nature, so that prior to this, scientists would look at the environment and try to change it. You know, how do you get more food? How do you, have a situation where there's more water, recycling water, external things. But now what they turn to is what Mengele was working on, which is making better, in quotes, human beings through radical evolution, through accelerated evolution, and human engineered people.
But he had some very dark projects there.
Oh, absolutely. He experimented on thousands of humans, sometimes just to see at what temperature blood would freeze. So these experiments were horrendous, and the idea was to, for example, change brown-eyed people to blue-eyed people. Look at longevity. To look at, and this is where the idea of super soldiers or transhumans comes in, to make a soldier that did not need to sleep, eat, or even drink water for long periods of time, that maybe was immune to pain. So at the end, these transhumans could be smarter, more agile, more athletic, have incredible endurance and strength, and be able to operate with no remorse whatsoever through behavioral techniques, so that they really became what the Nazis called and Mengele called slaughter machines. They'd be dropped behind enemy lines, and they would just kill anything in sight for days on end, and then terminate.
Wow.
Wow. They never invented saints, though, did they? Just these soldiers.
No. It doesn't seem to work that way, I'm afraid.
What's really scary, and I'm not totally familiar with it, but this new technique of CRISPR, where you can essentially cut and paste DNA segments, and it does not require sophisticated laboratory equipment. Little startup firms can do this, and so little startup nut jobs can be making transhumans in Topeka, Kansas, for all we know.
Absolutely.
Your book is right on the money. It really is.
And actually, it's called DNA splicing. CRISPR is all, but also DNA splicing.
Yeah.
And as a result, you can create designer children, for example. Children that are more athletic than they would be normally.
Well,
children that maybe have more intellectual capacity.
This
And
has
so you can actually design human beings.
Wow.
This has been going on for years. I used to entertain from time to time for a holiday party with Japanese children. These children were the children of parents who had come from Japan to work for a particular bank. And what I would be doing would be I would be face painting or doing things that would primarily interest the girls. And my partner in crime would come in and do things like juggling and top spinning and rope spinning that would primarily interest the boys. Now, there was some crossover, and lots of little Japanese boys got their face painted, and lots of girls learned to spin ropes. But we would be hired by this concern every 3 years or so that they could have different people, appear to have different people every year, because by the time 3 years went by, either the children had grown up a bit and forgotten, or there would be a different crop of children from Japan, because these were temporary workers, temporary in the United States at least. Well, after about 3 cycles, I was no longer needed because there were no more girl children. There were only boy children. There may be 2 girls and 40 boys. Why? Because the parents had selected to have a male child.
Yeah, it's really quite astounding, and not only in terms of just the concept of super soldiers and designer children, but really in terms of a society. It's clear to me, and this is already happening, that there will be enhanced humans and naturals. There'll be 2 classes of people, and the enhanced will obviously come from well-to-do backgrounds, and they will be enhanced in many ways, intellectually, physically, etc. And the naturals will be like sort of drones, people that are just normal people that don't have these enhancements or access to them. So you could really see where we talk about 1%, which may or may not be a very relevant phrase these days. But I think the 1% going in the future won't be about how much money you make. It'll be about what you are, whether you're enhanced or not. And the 1% clearly will live in a world, a virtual world almost, that's clearly different, better, and far above or inaccessible to the other 99%.
Would you say this is a breakaway society?
Frankly, I think it's already a breakaway society.
Okay. Well, moving on to the next question, having to do with the Forrestal situation.
Yep.
You had done some research on that, and it's a very interesting situation involving this fellow who was a long time higher up in the Navy, was it? And he was working with Truman, and then suddenly he was dead, having been thrown out or jumping out the window. What did you?
Suicide.
Yeah, it was a suicide. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Forrestal.
Yeah.
Actually, the Forrestal campus at Princeton University is where the experiments in my book take place.
Yes.
And these experiments deal with cloning, with basically they call it GRIN, G-R-I-N technologies. And that would be genetic engineering, robotics, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology. So basically what they're working on is merging these GRIN technologies with memories, with bodies and metabolisms, even with personalities and progeny to create radical evolution. They call it high-risk, high-reward experimentation. It's done by DARPA, and this is a real thing. This is not fiction.
DARPA is a real thing.
But so is his research.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And basically DARPA was started by, which is Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency under the Department of Defense, was started by Eisenhower post-World War II to keep the United States weaponry and technology for weaponry one full generation ahead of our nearest competitor. So you can only imagine what kinds of things they would be working on, but certainly the idea of super soldiers is not only something they're working on, it's something that clearly has happened. And I have some information from a book I wrote prior to this called The Privacy War, and some documents that came to me through a congressman that headed up the committee. His name was Neil Gallagher, about Operation Phoenix, where soldiers were dropped behind enemy lines. They had used behavioral modification techniques and drugs, a cocktail of drugs called the Green Hornet. And basically these were amphetamines and combinations of other drugs. Actually, I have a list of them. And some testimony from the committee by some of the soldiers involved who had no memories of the atrocities they committed. But basically they were given index cards with the names of families. And they'd go into, that were supposedly Viet Cong, and they'd assassinate them in the most brutal ways. And this would go on for days at a time, and then they'd be picked up again and brought back. But literally, they could operate for days at a time with no need for food, water, sleep, and they'd literally be killing machines. It was called Operation Phoenix, and it's very well documented.
Okay. Well, that is very interesting.
Good to know our tax dollars at work.
Your tax dollars at work, indeed. Had you read The Men Who Stare at Goats by John Ronson?
Yeah, I did.
And Jim Channon and his whole crew?
Yeah, I did, as a matter of fact. One of the really good books on that, which just scrapes the surface, was called In Search of the Manchurian Candidate. And, that has a lot of the things that went on in the 60s. But again, if you think about people, just basic, a woman goes into McGill University Hospital in Canada for depression and winds up in some kind of a sleep deprivation chamber for 40 days on LSD.
Boy.
This is the kind of thing that was going on. I mean, people had to be toilet trained after these experiments in brainwashing, wiping minds clean, and implanting memories.
That's
and this was
very
all done
interesting.
for military purposes, of course.
That part is really interesting in terms of what some people have talked about involving UFOs, that some of the things that have been seen are not extraterrestrial visitors or interdimensional visitors, but rather government programs where false memories have been inserted into people. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's entirely possible, and not only possible, but not even probable. I think you can probably say these things with some real certitude.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, maybe it would interest you, but I do have a document that I could read to you from one of the participants in Operation Phoenix from 1966. Would you like to hear something?
Yes, go for it.
As standard equipment, most of us carried hush puppies, a Mark 22 Model O, which used 9mm ammo and had a 5-inch barrel equipped with silencer. The weapon, along with the fact that each of us could kill with our hands, had only one other thing in common. We were insane. The most important element of the program, aside from the men, were the drugs supplied by the local case manager that kept us awake for days at a time, erased the deeds committed from the mind, and allowed peace to enter the soul, at least for a time. It was called the Green Hornet, a capsule containing a mixture of Benadryl, an amphetamine which stimulated the central nervous system, Dexamyl, a synthetic steroid that stimulated the adrenal glands, which made a man superhuman, and Reserpine, commonly used to treat high blood pressure and mental patients. The Green Hornet that Jones described was a capsule that, quote, caused a man to act faster than normal. He could feel his heart speed up, his head would throb, and it felt as if the brain was actually growing. It gave the man his own personal radar, and his senses were fine-tuned to an extreme pitch. Every nerve ending was sensitive to sound, sight, and smell, and it seemed as if a receiver was in the brain. Put all this together, and a man could stay awake for days, fight, function, and not lose his mind. That comes from congressional testimony.
Wow.
I don't understand why people spend so much time and money making ways to kill other people.
Well, Albert Einstein had a great quote about that. He said, giving technology to generals is like giving an axe to a serial killer.
That's a good,
There
I
you
have
go.
not heard that one before, but that's excellent. That's really good.
So, how do you come down on the Forrestal incident?
Well, there's a lot of speculation of what he knew or what he saw. Some say that he was involved with UFOs and actually with a alien being that had been captured or rescued from the Roswell incident.
Yeah.
Whether this is true or not, I don't know, but clearly this was somebody with a lot on his mind. And at that time, as my friend Neil Gallagher, the congressman who ran the privacy committees, found out, there was all kinds of experimentation going on human beings, unknown to them. Sometimes grammar school children that were given drugs. Half the class were given a drug, half the class wasn't as a control group to see how their grades came up. They called them smart pills at the time. Things like that. Things that were clear violations of any human rights or constitutional rights. And so these are really documented things at this stage of the game. Assassinations, the church committee, for example, in the late 70s, contradicted the Warren Committee on, assassinations. I mean, we were just killing people. We were experimenting on people, killing people. It was just absolutely, a bizarre time in American history. And I don't think it's changed. I think it's just become institutionalized.
And gone very dark.
Exactly.
What bothers me, occasionally you read in the news about a very private individual doing a berserk act. About a year and a half ago, there was a woman with her son, I believe, in the car.
Right.
And she'd rammed the White House, tried to kill the president. And it was completely out of character, out of nowhere.
She
And
was
I
from
wonder
Connecticut.
if these people aren't being treated, and not, obviously not that they know about, because you'll hear about it here and there, just these bizarre incidents.
Well, the Unabomber was a good example of that. He was one of 6 people at Harvard that was being paid to, undergo experiments and testing on drugs, etc. I think of the 6, and there's a book on it called The Unabomber and Harvard. And basically, I think 5 of the 6 either wound up committing suicide or doing some violent act. I think 1 survives. So actually, Dark Angel starts with Jack Madsen going to Princeton University at the behest of parents whose daughter has jumped off a building and committed suicide. They can't understand why she would commit a suicide. Clearly she did. And Madsen verifies what the police find, that it was suicide. But what he can never understand is why.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And once he starts investigating the question why, is when he starts to come upon these black projects. It's called Mayhem, which is going on below Forrestal campus in secret laboratories run by DARPA.
Well, I wonder how much in this story you borrowed there from the Forrestal incident, because immediately when I was reading about the young girl committing suicide and having no reason, I thought about Forrestal right there. And also the suicide rate at Princeton, you have down there as being the highest among the Ivy League colleges, which is fine to write that. I mean, that's...
It's true. It happens to be a fact. Yeah.
Is it really? I always thought it was Cornell.
Well, as a matter of fact, the suicide rate was so high that above the second floor, they hasp all the windows, so they can't open all the way.
At Princeton.
That's correct.
Oh, wow. I had always thought that it was Cornell because of the gorge, and it was just so competitive and cold.
Yeah. Well, I guess many of these universities, particularly the Ivy League, it's just so competitive. It gets into sort of a surreal world, I think.
But I don't think they put suicide rates on their brochures.
No, I don't think so either. Or the fact that they put hasps on the windows, right?
Yeah.
Well, having gone with a child to both Princeton and Cornell and a number of other Ivy League institutions, I could just feel it at Cornell. Whereas
Oh, really?
at Princeton,
I see.
I didn't feel that much. So moving on, how much did you study about the prevalence of these former Nazis in this country?
Quite a bit, and as a matter of fact, I was going to Germany on business once a month for about 15 years. So I actually went to the former SS headquarters in North Westphalia in Wielisburg and Germany. And there's really a lot to be learned from all of that. But there was a lot of satanic cult things going on there, and a lot of the Nazi way of doing things, the SS way of doing things, whether it had to do with medical practices, whether it had to do with eugenics, whether it had to do with intelligence operations, really influenced the CIA. And in my view, people say, well, many people feel like the United States took a wrong turn somewhere. Well, if I had a place in history to say where the United States took a wrong turn, it was getting in league with the SS and the Nazis after World War II, because I think it changed the philosophy of intelligence agencies to, again, where assassinations were okay, and a lot of the things that the Nazis were doing, we just sort of inculcated into our own playbook, including human experimentation.
Yeah, well, and they also invented propaganda, and we see that now in all the political campaigns.
Tell a lie often and enough.
And big enough, and then you get, well, never mind. We won't get into politics.
No,
but I would say this. I think that's a very good point, because I would say if there's a question that people, at least that have some sense of history, ask, is what is the truth? Because it's like Baskin-Robbins these days.
Yeah.
Which truth would you like?
Yeah. And speaking of history, we should make a note and a thank you to all those people that died back in 1944 on June 6th, which was D-Day. And so it seems a shame that a lot of these people that died on both sides really felt they were doing the right thing and forwarding human progress. And I agree with you in your book that what they were really doing was forwarding sort of like a forward guard for creatures like Dark Angel, making the world safe for conspiracies.
And I also think, I mean, one of the powerful things about Dark Angel is that really ultimately what Jack Madsen stumbles onto is an attempt to recreate a Fourth Reich. And basically, this is not science fiction. I mean, this is not crazy. I mean, you had Daisy, this sheep cloned, back 40 years ago almost. I would bet my house that there's a number of countries that have cloned human beings.
Yeah,
a number of countries.
Your pet cloned in China.
It's amazing, isn't it? So I think that this sort of idea of transhumans is not only here; it's almost irrevocably here. It's part of our culture. If you look at even my son and I are watching, just for lack of anything else to watch, weightlifters. Just sort of channel surfing, and so these people were so freakish. But no offense against weightlifters per se, but these guys are clearly, and they'll tell you, that they're on all kinds of steroids, all kinds of doping chemistries, etc. And really, they are transhumans.
Yeah.
Because people don't look like that. People don't have backsides that are the size of a melon and shoulders the width of a car. Human beings aren't built that way. So really walking among us right now, whether it's Mark McGuire or Lance Armstrong or Arnold Schwarzenegger, really are transhumans that we're all very well aware of.
That is interesting and remarkable on a certain level, but what sort of gets me more is this whole part about erasing memories and placing in new ones, and all the people in the United States who were experimented on with LSD back in the, let's say 1960.
It was the 60s, yeah, sure. And as a matter of fact, I mean, some of them didn't survive it. And, I think it was Frank Olson actually jumped out a window. He was given LSD, didn't know it, and his survivors sued the U.S. government and actually won, because it was one of the few documented situations that came to light where this guy just jumped out of a hotel window. Very similar to, again, Forrestal, or very similar to Mary Linda Schumann in my book.
Yes,
in the
Mary Linda Schumann. In your book, that's correct. It's just very, very interesting. And how do you come down on this situation up in Connecticut where the young man killed all the children at the grammar school?
Sandy Hook?
Sandy Hook, yeah. How do you come down on that here he had all these guns, and all of a sudden, bang, one day everything went.
I think he was just crazy.
Just crazy, you think?
Yeah, I think
there's naturally crazy people. It doesn't have to be, they had nut jobs back in the cave days, I'm sure.
But I would say this: it's a little like if you want to cultivate a plant, an orchid, you get a particular kind of soil and you get a particular kind of watering procedure and certain nutrients, and the flower grows. Mm-hmm. Similarly, craziness grows out of a certain kind of environment. And I think the United States, if you look at the gun violence, if you look at the arrest statistics, if you look at the drug use, I mean, we have become a culture. I was just in the airport on my way to Bermuda, which was very nice, but you go to order food, and basically they put an iPad in front of you, mm-hmm. and you have to figure out, let's say you want a glass of beer and a sandwich. So you enter all of this, you do your thing, and let's say you want another glass of beer. You have to go through all of that again. Mm-hmm. People are, and by the time it's over, you say, who do I work for? Do I work for this restaurant? Because it sure feels like I work for this restaurant. There's no human interaction. At the end of the day, it's just a nuisance from A to Z. There's no human interaction. There's no smile from a waiter. There's no human encounter or interchange. And societies like that breed madness.
Well, I think we're all going down that corridor.
Would you agree? I mean, basically, it's like the orchid in reverse.
Yeah.
Lack of human touch, lack of just the human scent, the idea of shaking hands or hugging someone, etc. This is a culture that has really expurgated that from its vocabulary.
Well, what you quote actually is E.O. Wilson back in the 60s with sociobiology, where with his experiments with Norwegian rats, after it overpopulated, overcrowded, the rats all turned on each other, where not overpopulated, lots of land, they were fine, and they had their little rat thing. But also in this country, in the early 1700s, where you had all these phenomenal inventions of government and philosophy, those were times where there was a very limited population. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think overpopulation is truly at the root of many evils. Yeah, it also allows for cannon fodder for these dark angels.
Yeah. But we were talking about Forrestal and universities. Actually, DARPA invests 90% of its budget outside the federal government in universities. MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon. Those are, this is where they conduct their radical, high-risk, high-reward change experiments. And to talk about super soldiers, really, this is, again, not something that's science fiction by any means. Mm. I mean, for example, just to give you a modest example, scientists at the University of Pennsylvania created genetically modified mice. The mice were like shockingly large and muscular, massive haunches, necks wider than their heads. In other words, they created a new species of mice. And that's exactly what's going on with human beings.
That's troubling.
So you figure the top 1%, as you say, that are there. What happens to the other 99%, which we will probably be part of? I mean, do we just go on our way and we go to supermarkets, we get our little Soylent Green and go home and watch our little entertainment, sort of like life is today?
Yeah, I think that that's true. I don't know that somebody puts a billboard up and says there are enhanced human beings and naturals.
Yeah.
I don't think it goes that way.
No.
I just think an outside observer would look at it and say, look, this 1% has computers. This 1% has chips in their head so that they can communicate telepathically. Mm-hmm. This 1% has all the wealth. This 1% lives 30 years longer. This 1%, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This 1% is unusually handsome or beautiful. And I guess the other 99% look up and admire them the way one might admire movie stars.
But there is going to be a glitch. One of the naturals will be enhanced just due to perhaps genetic dabbling from the enhanced ones. And they're going to realize what's going on. And there'll be a revolution, and the whole crap will start all over again. I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, that might actually happen, Kate. Mm-hmm. We can only wait and see, I think. I don't think we're on the inside of DARPA or anything else. But Ron...
I think Ron is. Ron's doing good. Great book, Ron.
Before Ron runs off to become genetically enhanced, we would like him to mention his book and where it's available.
Sure. Dark Angel is the name of the book. Nice, easy title. And it's available in bookstores, certainly on Amazon. And if somebody, buys it on Amazon, I'd really appreciate it if they wrote a review. That's always, very helpful. We're looking at perhaps a feature film. There's a screenplay being written about it. And I think Dark Angel is an important book because I think it brings to light in an accessible way the potential that we face going into the future and might not be aware of otherwise. I think it's important that people understand where we are as a species and the crossroads that we might be at.
Makes me really wonder about my wearing my Fitbit, if you know what I mean. Anyhow, thank you so much, Ron, for being on again, and keep us posted.
And
I will. It's always a pleasure.
And keep up the good work. We thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, bye.
Hello.
Hey, Al.
How you doing?
Good. Fahrusha
and Kate Valentine.
And Alice with us today from the Bronxville Paranormal Society. And he's going to talk to us about a couple of his UFO sightings. Before he actually starts with that, one thing that came to my mind when I was talking to Al was that certain people are just those that have multiple sightings or multiple experiences, while other people can go through their whole lives and never even see, the wisp of a ghost or hear any voices in their heads or ever see a flying saucer. So, Al, I think you're one of those guys, right?
Yeah, and my brother is the other guy you're talking about.
He's just jealous because what the T-shirt says, the voices don't speak to him. Yeah.
My brother's a parapsychologist, and he's been doing this for 40 years. And he's seen one UFO when he was like 12 years old, when they were visiting Italy back in, the 50s or something. I don't even know, and that was like the only one he's ever seen.
Wow.
So tell us a little bit about your best sightings,
or even your society too. A little bit.
Yeah, we'll hear about the society.
Okay.
We'll give them a plug at the end, but we want to get in the
sightings.
UFO.
Okay.
Yeah, Kate, I'm sorry I missed you at Pine Bush. Would have liked to have met you. But getting back to my sightings, I have really three big ones that are in my brother's book. My brother wrote a book. It's called Paranormal Family and Friends by Frank R. Santariga. Those are the three that are in that have been copyrighted that I can't use. But the first one goes back to well, I'll start with the big one. The big one was in 84, 85. I was working down in Yonkers, and I was living up in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And one night I was traveling north on the Merritt Parkway, and I was coming up over one of the hills, and the car, I had just bought a brand new 84 Mustang, and the car was starting to putter on me.
Oh, boy.
So as I was getting up to the top of the hill, I said, let me get off onto the grass before I get rear-ended. And I got to the top of the hill. I got off the grass. And when I got out of the car, I looked down, and I seen the parkway was a parking lot. There was just cars stopped on both sides of the parking lot, and I really didn't know what was going on. And I kind of seen a state trooper down there, so I thought maybe there was a motorcycle accident or something. Yeah. So I was going down to get help because I figured my car was dead. And I got down there and I said, what's going on? And he said, look up. And the whole time I was there, I never thought to look up because I'm on top of the hill looking down. And so I look up, and there in the sky over the parkway, maybe 50 feet above the tree line, is like a mothership that I would describe that looked like the Roman Colosseum, for lack of a better definition. But it was all lit up underneath. It had different levels, looked like a 12-story building or something. And it was just sitting there, parked in the sky, and the people were all out of their cars, and everybody's looking up. There's no wind, there's no noise, there's no hysteria. People aren't running around screaming it's the end of the world, and everybody's just looking up at this thing in awe. And I turned to the state trooper and I say, what do you think it is? And he just gave me a look like, are you joking me? You know, he goes, what do you think it is? I go, it looks like a UFO to me. He goes, yeah, exactly. And we're just sitting there for a few minutes, and people are coming over, and we're all talking, and we're just amazed by the size of this thing. I mean, it was just humongous. And after a few minutes of it just sitting there, it kind of just popped up like 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. Went up 1,000 feet. Wow. And then all of a sudden you hear all the cars start back up. The radios are going on, and the police radio started to work. So I'm standing next to him. He calls into the station and he says, could you send out a couple of Air National Guards from the Bridgeport airport, because we have a UFO between these two exits on the parkway. So the dispatcher says, okay. So they send out the two Air National Guard guys. They get up in the plane, and they're flying towards us, and they're saying, it's a beautiful clear night. It's like 7:30 at night, 8 o'clock. It's July. The sun is out. Everybody can see it. And they say, well, we can't see anything visually. Where is it? And he says, it's, right here. And say, well, we don't have anything on radar, but we'll be there in like 30 seconds. We'll be over you in 30 seconds. At that point, this mother craft of a ship goes straight up in the air. Just in a blink of an eye, it's gone. It's just gone in a blink of an eye. And again, there's no sound, there's no wind, there's no nothing. This thing is gone. At that point, the planes come roaring down the parkway, and they're really low, and the trees are blowing, and the leaves are falling all over the place, and the ground is shaking. Felt like the end of the world. At that point, that was the only time during the whole experience that I was scared, when the airplanes went over, and they're talking to the officer on the ground, and they're saying, well, we don't see anything. We're going to turn around. We're going to come back. They go back up north up the parkway, and then they leave. And I go racing home. I was living with my brother at the time. I was living in his attic apartment. He had a 3-family house, and I was up in the upstairs. And I go crashing in the front door. He comes running out the back. He heard about it on the radio. They had actually seen it in Bridgeport, come over Bridgeport, and one of the DJs from the radio station went up on the roof, and he was talking about it. And my brother had his camera and all his gear. He was getting ready to jump in the car to come and get pictures of it. And I was like, stop, it's gone. And I said, you're not going to believe what I saw. And then it just told him about it, and basically blew his mind. He was all ready to get the evidence, the smoking gun, the great photo, and it was already gone by the time he got out of the house. Second time, another time was in 1994. 94 or 95. I was working in Yonkers at the time, and at the Yonkers post office on North Broadway, North Yonkers on the North End. It was a cold winter night, and me and my friend Kevin, we were the last two guys to leave the building that night. We were just hanging out by the cars, shooting the breeze, and it was really, dark, quiet, cold night, but there was a cold chill in the air, but it wasn't really cold, and Kev kind of felt that he was an abductee, and we seen this light in the sky really, really far away, just a bright light, and it looked like it was blinking, and I just thought it was high atmospheric clouds going by to give it that impression. And I said to Kev, just busting his chops, I said, "Hey, Kev, watch this. I'm going to give it a Morse code with the headlights in my car." So I started playing with the Morse code, and Kevin was freaking out. He's like, "Stop. Don't do that. Leave it alone," And I, honest to God, I didn't think it was anything other than a star. And right after I finished the Morse code thing, it started to move closer towards us. And there was a big field that divided us and the next street over. It must have been like 100, 200 yards away. And there was a tree line there. Of course, there was no leaves on the tree because it was December or January, something like that. And this thing stops across the field on the other tree line, and it drops out 3 red balls. And these balls are coming down, and we're watching these balls as they're floating down out of this craft behind a tree line, and they get to a certain height, and they all just blink off, and they're gone, and you can't see them anymore. And at this point, something says to me, "Look up." And I look up, and we're standing by the building. The building's maybe 50 feet high, if that, and there's a black triangle directly above our heads, sitting there. And it's looking at us, and we're looking at it, and Kevin is absolutely freaking out, and he's trying to get back into the building, and I'm trying to stop him, because if he goes back in the building, the alarm's going to go off, and the postal inspectors are going to come, and I'm like, stop, don't go in the building, And he was just freaking out, and I'm looking at this thing, and he's like saying, "Oh, maybe it's the stealth bomber and all this," and I'm like, "Come on, Kev, this thing is just parked in the sky, like somebody pulled up and put it in park." Again, no sound. No motor. You couldn't hear any motor. There was no wind, nothing like that. But it was so close that I could see like rivets in the metal work. It looked like there was metal work I could see, and it just pivoted as if it was on an axis, and it just kind of glided back across the field where it had dropped off those 3 red balls. And if you would have blinked your eye, you would have lost it in the night sky. It blended in so well. And he went north on the parkway. I went south, and I ran home, and I went up on the roof to my house where I was living just to make sure nothing had followed me home. We didn't see anything. And 10 years to the date, 2004, something like that, I moved upstate. I'm living upstate, bought a house upstate, and my daughter was born. My daughter, who was born in 94, she had just turned 10, and we're coming back from martial arts, and we're driving down the road. We're going north up this road in Dutchess County, Route 376, and she says to me, out of the blue, she says, "Dad, there's a UFO following us." And I start laughing because she's a 10-year-old kid. And I go, "What do you know about UFOs, And she says, "Well, there's a UFO following us." I said, "Okay." And she goes, "Look at that light. It's been following us since we left the karate school." And I say, "It's probably just a plane or a helicopter going to the airport. The local airport is on that road." But I noticed that, we're hitting all the traffic lights and we're hitting all the stop signs, and this thing is never passing us. And I'm saying, why isn't this thing passing us? It should have gone past us at a certain point. It should have gotten by us, but it never does. It always stays to my left, my rear corner panel, right where she can see it, and she's watching it the whole time. We get to the airport, and this thing makes a hard left, and it goes south towards the city. We continue north towards our house, and I tell her, I said, "See, must have been a plane or a helicopter or something. No big deal." We get home, we pull into the driveway, the sensor lights go on, she jumps out of the car. I'm farting around in the car looking for something, and I hear her screaming hysterical. So I jump out of the car, go, "What's the matter?" She says, "Dad, look up." And there above my house is a black triangle just sitting above my house, silently, no wind, no noise, no nothing, and it's just sitting there, parked over my house. And at this point, I'm a little aggravated that this thing is parked over my house.
I'd be scared to death.
So I said to her, go get your mother and your brother. And my wife comes out on the front deck with my son, who's about 5 at the time. And she goes, what? And I go, look up. And she looks up and she sees it. And my son sees it. And he gets scared to death. And she grabs him and she runs inside. And I'm standing there looking at it. And I'm just like thinking, what do you want with me? Why are you over my house? What's this all about? And it starts to drift, just float past me. It gets to the road and it makes a hard left and it's going east on my road. I live on a long cul-de-sac, and at the end of my road are power lines, and there's no street lights up here where I live. It's pitch black, and I'm keeping an eye on this thing. Again, if I blink, I'll lose it. It gets to the power lines and it drops out 3 red balls. Okay.
Oh,
at this point, I'm freaking out. I run into the house. I grab my German Shepherd, my mag flashlight, the cell phone. I grab my samurai sword, and I tell my wife, I'm going into the woods, okay? So I don't want to go into the woods unarmed because there are coyotes and big cats and black bear. I'm not going to walk into the woods unarmed at night. So I said to my wife, here's the cell phone. Call me every 10 minutes. I'm going to look for these 3 red balls that fell out of this thing. I go under the power line. The power lines, there's a nice cut under the power lines. Kids use it to ride their dirt bikes and their quad runners and everything. So it's a big open space, And I'm looking around. I'm looking for broken branches where this thing may have come down. I'm looking for smoldering leaf litter on the ground because, again, it was in, the winter, December, January. I'm looking for smoldering objects, anything that looks unusual. And I walked up and down that power line maybe a mile in each direction while my wife called me every 10 minutes to stay in contact. And I found absolutely nothing.
Well,
whatever came out of that craft never hit the ground.
You're a braver man than me. But then again,
well, I was
not
mad.
a man.
I'll be honest with you. I was upset at that point because, what is this thing doing parked over my house? I mean, what is it? Why is it here? Why is it over my house?
Sucking energy from the power line?
Well, I mean, it didn't hover over the power lines like to absorb the energy. It hovered over the power lines to drop these 3 red balls out. And I don't know what those 3 red balls are, or, where they went when they came out or whatever. But
I wonder if these are the same things that are described as red orbs. I met a fellow at the UFO convention in Pennsylvania. Actually, it was over the river in New Jersey, but it was the Pennsylvania MUFON meeting about a year and a half ago. And there was a gentleman there, and I'm awfully sorry, I can't remember his name, but he had written an entire book on how many people were seeing these small red orbs, anything from the size of a baseball to the size of a small room, like the size of a Volkswagen or something.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And I wonder if these things are related. It might be an interesting thing for you to look into, Al. But anyway, I want to thank you so much.
One question.
Okay,
just
go
quick
ahead,
question.
Kate.
What would come to mind are any missing time on your part?
No,
Good.
no, not at all. Not that particular night.
Yeah.
But I've had experiences in my home where I believe not only I was abducted, but one of my children were abducted too,
'cause your
or at
daughter
least
picked up on
attempted to be abducted. And then the BPS team, the Bronxville Paranormal Society, we did do an investigation last October on Halloween's Eve, where we seen a red orb in the sky that came to us, and when we shut off our headlamps to get a better, it hit us with a floodlight.
Huh.
And at some point during the course of the night, we lost 2 hours. But we do have that on video because we were streaming live on Periscope and Twitter at the time. So we do have that on video. It is on our website. But it's that's another story for another day.
Yeah, well,
Terrific sightings.
Yes, very
Really.
good sightings, and we
Excellent.
really
And that's just the tip
appreciate
of the
you
iceberg.
sharing them with us.
I've had tons and tons of sightings. I mean, tons of sightings. I have so many. At one point, I had so many sightings that I thought I was losing my mind, and I had to call my brother. I said, "I think I'm losing my mind. I'm seeing them every single night." And he just said, "Document everything: the time, where you were, and all this other stuff, and try to get photos of them." I tried a couple of times, but
Nobody
the
gets
camera always said the batteries were dead. But as soon as the thing went away, the camera worked fine.
Yeah, that seems to be the way it is. Again, Al, thank you very much for coming on and sharing a few experiences with us. And we hope to have you on again. Would you
I would love to be
please
back.
document where you're from and how people can get in touch with you and why they should get in touch with you?
Well, my team's name is the Bronxville Paranormal Society. You can find us on the net, www.bronxvilleparanormalsociety.com. We're on all social medias, so you can find us on social media. Again, same thing with myself. I'm on all social medias, Al Santariga. And you could just email me or text me or whatever. Message me if you have something going on that you think we ought to look into, whether it be sightings, cryptids, or paranormal ghosts, or whatever. We cover the gamut of paranormal. We don't just look for one particular thing, and so we're always interested in picking up cases and investigating. That's what we do. And I'll tell you what, we did an investigation that night at Pine Bush in that 100-year-old Victorian, and you won't believe the evidence we came away with. It was amazing.
Well, we're going to get back to you on that, Al.
Absolutely, and we'd love to come back on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm sorry I missed you at Pine Bush too. Maybe
Yeah, I'm
next
sorry.
year. Next year.
Yes, maybe
Or
next
sooner.
year. Absolutely.
Or sooner. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, signing off then, Al.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, ladies.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
being
Bye,
here.
Al.
Bye-bye.
So, Kate, we had double trouble today, huh?
Yeah. I don't know what's more paranormal, UFOs or all these DARPA experiments.
Well, it seems as though the DARPA experiments are scarier. I mean, there are UFOs that seem to harm people, but most of them don't.
No, yeah, most of them.
Most
are
of them don't.
Other than scaring them out of their wits.
Yeah,
But
there
other
have been
than that-
people who've gotten irradiated, and then there were
Yeah.
people down in Brazil that really got messed up down in that island,
largely
Colares.
Largely nothing much.
But largely, people just get frightened. They lose time. They see things. But the DARPA is more scary to me.
Especially you don't know who's really running it and how sane they are.
How
Probably
sane
not
is
very.
anybody?
But most people don't deal with death rays and transhuman soldiers and stuff.
Oh, well.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well, we're looking forward to seeing you again or hearing us again. And we do welcome your participation by way of letters, writing to our websites, which are www.shatteredrealitypodcast.com and shatteredrealitypodcast.wordpress.com. No www on that. And I think we're going to have to wait till next time, but we had some interesting responses to Rosalind Byrne, which maybe we'll read next time, and look forward to hearing from all of you.
Because DARPA, I mean, there's got to be conspiracy theorists out there that have a lot to say about DARPA.
Indeed, there must be. And please remember, we're a non-commercial radio type program.
Right.
It's a podcast, but there's nobody to tell us what to do or what to say. So we are really the antidote to mainstream media. So please get out there and support us, like our page on Facebook, and give us some feedback. Thanks so much.
Okay, guess till
Goodbye.
next time. Bye.
From Shattered Reality.